Hello, Lisa here. Welcome to Walking the SelfWorth Path, a series where I share with you my favorite tarot and witchy tools, techniques, and rituals to support your journey to an empowered life. So today we're going to be talking about my favorite decks and books for the work of integration. And because integration isn't necessarily a word we're going to right away all be on the same page about what I'm talking about, I'm going to start with books, and I'm going to start with the book that obviously inspired this series, which is my book, The SelfWorth Path, A Guided Journey to an Empowered Life. I don't have a lot of books to talk about in this section, but the ones that I do, I feel like really pack a punch. First, let's talk a little bit about the Self-Worth Path section on integration and what we're really doing in this part of the path, right? Because we've been through these other stages. Theoretically, if you've been following along with me on this series, then we've done work on body acceptance, self-care, self-awareness, and accountability, which includes things like shadow work. But in integration, we're sort of putting this all together in the way that we kind of engage with and interact with the rest of the world. So the work of integration, the sections on my book that we cover are Getting Naked, which is about vulnerability, Facing Your Fears, Being Yourself, which is about authenticity, Committing to Yourself, which is really like, I think, taking that next step to step fully into embracing your worth and living life and engaging with others as if you do know your worth, and Making Your Own Rules. So when we know that that's sort of the content we're going to be looking at, I think that's really, really helpful. So the work of integration in the Self-Worth Path definitely has a lot to do. There it is. There's the section header for integration. So when we get into this section of the book, we look at rest. We look at really looking at how to let down our guard and really be who we truly are with the people that deserve to see that side of us, the people that have earned our trust, the people that make us feel safe. We look at our fear and how we interact with and engage with fear. And we look at being ourselves. But along the lines of doing all of that work, we also start to engage truly with our inner child. The reason that I have inner child work in the section of the book where we're really integrating everything we've done is because I think it takes going through all of the work to figure out who we are and learning how to embrace that all parts of ourselves before I feel like we're really ready to do inner child work. That's just been my personal experience. Your mileage may definitely vary, but you will see some nods to inner child in the decks and books that I'm going to recommend. Obviously, I always recommend the Self-Worth Path. I think that it makes a great companion to this series, or this series of videos makes a great companion to the book, however you want to look at it. I am hoping to do more things with Self-Worth Path in the future. I'd love to put all of the journal prompts and activities in the Self-Worth Path into a workbook form. That's definitely something I'd like to figure out how to do. So that's on my to-do list, maybe for 2022. But in the meantime, let's talk about some other decks, and then we'll circle back to books. So decks. So the first deck that I really recommend for doing the work of integration, where we take all that we've learned and we really put it all together and continue the work. I think that's the real big thing, because integration isn't about going, okay, we're done now, and we check off boxes on a list. It's more like we go, okay, we now recognize the work that we need to do on an ongoing basis, and we commit to that work. And the Dreams of Gaia Tarot, especially the full-size version with this full-size guidebook, which I've edged, I probably have talked about this earlier in the series too, but it just does such a good job of helping us to address the deeper stuff and to heal and to integrate experiences from our past into our present and our future. I just think this deck does a really good job at looking at things like blockages, looking at how we engage with the world, and it's very nurturing and supportive in that way. I do prefer working with this little pocket deck when I'm working with the actual cards, but I'm so attached to this big guidebook. So I actually have the full-size deck just put away, like in my closet, because this is the actual physical deck that I prefer to reach for, because I just like the cardstock, I like the backings. I like that they're just not all big bordered and everything, but it is difficult in my experience to work with this deck as a regular tarot deck. So I do use it more almost like an oracle deck, or as a way to pull journal prompts or thought-provoking prompts, and then I read the more meaty description of that card in this guidebook, in this larger guidebook. Now, I believe you can also get an app for the Dreams of Gaia Tarot, which I believe contains the full text of the guidebook. This has even been chewed on by like my dog at one point. So if you wanted to get just the pocket, but you wanted to have access to all of this, I think you can get the app. Somebody could confirm in the comments down below if you could. That would be great if you know for sure, just so that we all know. But I think that you can do that, so you don't have to buy both versions of the deck if you prefer the pocket. But This is such a great healing deck, and definitely one I recommend for those of you who want to continue to do that really deep dive kind of work with yourself on your path. I think this is a really good one to accompany you. A more recent acquisition for me, but one that I've been using an awful lot. In fact, I've got the box stored because this deck actually lives on one of my altars, so I can pull a card from it on the regular. These are the Power of Surrender cards. I will have links to all the decks and books I talk about in the description box down below. This one's great because it's just good for general reminders about things to work on. And I love the word surrender because for me, a lot of my work is around trust and releasing the need to feel control over things and over situations in my life and over people. So the word surrender is a really good word for me in my own practice, and one that continues to come up in my shadow work and in my personal growth work. So this is really helpful. And I love the messages here. As I'm literally talking about it, surrender your desire to control people. Surrender to the beauty of the natural world. Surrender outdated beliefs about yourself. There's a lot of really good reminders in this deck about how to engage in a way that keeps you in your power, keeps you in your sovereignty. It keeps you walking the path. And so this deck is really great. It's very underrated. It reminds me very much of those like really old school kind of oracle decks that used to be really popular. Like this used to be all oracle decks were really. And it's really, really good. But it's got the title, which is very blunt. And then it's got a little clarifying message underneath on what it means, right? So you don't need a guidebook with this. It's just a really good one, I think, to pull a daily card for journaling or for reflection. Like, look at this. Surrender your need to always be right. Surrender to play. Surrender unhealthy relationships. Like this will keep you on your path, I think. So I think this is a really, really good one and very straightforward. And you'll notice when I recommend decks for this series, I always recommend decks in like a very wide variety of aesthetics and things like that, because I just think we all respond to so many different things in different ways. So another one that I think is really good in a lot of the same way that the surrender cards are is the Postcards from Spirit by Colette Baron Reid. So this is another one when you just need an affirming message. You just need to remember that you're okay, that you're going to be okay, that you can keep walking the path. These postcards from Spirit are just really lovely messages. They can really help you to feel supported when you're having a tough day, or when the work feels harder than you wish it did. And there's going to be days like that. When we're doing self-worth work, when we're doing shadow work, when we're holding ourselves accountable, there are days when you just are tired and you're like, I don't want to do the work, right? And I feel like on days like that, having something like this that you can reach for that's going to give you a supportive, positive message. And it's not a message that doesn't call you out. Like this deck will call you out, but it does it in these really loving ways that make you feel like you're being like held at the same time in just the nicest possible way. So I really love this deck for that. And it is, again, another mass market deck. In fact, I think everything I've shown so far, I think everything I have to show is mass market, which is kind of nice, but these are all really, really solid ones. So another deck, and I'm going to show these two together. Affirmator, actually no, I'm going to talk about them separately. So Affirmators Oracle. The cardstock on this is terrible, in my opinion. It feels so papery, but my copy is held up really well. Much like Postcards from Spirit, this is another deck that I think will help to keep you on your path. It has messages that talk really a lot about the things you need to do to be living as your best self. These cards speak to things like authenticity and vulnerability and seeing things through and committing to yourself and putting yourself first and practicing self-care and like moving through the world in a way that is very freeing and whole and completion based. There's literally the worthiness card as I speak, power, engagement, good things to come, ideal partnership. So authenticity, right? Like it's literally like what I'm saying. So a lot of the themes in these cards definitely mirror the kinds of things that I talk about in the self-worth path and the kinds of things that we do when we're on a personal growth journey, when we're really looking to live fully as who we are in a way that is good in the world, right? As we do our work. So I love that. And I also, of course, then love the Affirmators Tarot. I'm still zoomed in, but that's okay. This one is such a underrated deck. I talk about it a bunch. The guidebook in here is so good. But what's I think especially neat is that every guidebook entry is honest, but it's cheeky and it's playful and it will call you out, but it does it in this sassy, supportive way, just like the Affirmators Oracle does. But of course, this follows the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot system. So if you are not a big Oracle person, or maybe you just want a tarot deck that does this for you as well as an Oracle deck, then the Affirmators Tarot is really approachable. This would actually also be an excellent deck for shadow work, especially I would say shadow work light, where we want to really approach things, but we're feeling unsure. We're not sure how we're going to feel. We want to feel more supported through the process. We're not really in a stage where we want to get our butt kicked. We just want to really look at ourselves in loving, compassionate ways and hold ourselves accountable in loving, compassionate ways. So this can be really good for that work. But I think one of the things that sets this pile of decks apart is that these look at the process of transformation, living in an empowered way, and really stepping into your worth in a holistic manner, right? We're not looking at just one angle of that work. We're looking at the cohesive nature of doing all of the work and continuing to do all of the work, and tools that will support us in doing that. And so I think these decks that I've shown so far are really good in that capacity, at just like really giving you tools that will grow with you as you continue to grow. Lastly, I want to talk about one that's a little more specific. So this is a deck specifically for inner child work. And these are the Inner Child cards by Isha Lerner, yes. It's like, who is the creator? These are massive. So for comparison's sake, let me just grab a Power to Surrender Oracle card so you can kind of see the difference. These are huge. So this is like standard Oracle card size. These are massive. And I actually think that's one of the things that's really special about this deck. The massive cards mean that they make your hands feel small, which is one of the things that I think helps us connect to inner child. It certainly does for me. These cards are fairy tale themed. I have toyed with the idea of trimming them, but I always come back to no, because of what I just said about the massive size makes them feel like what it might feel like to have small hands trying to juggle or work with big cards. So this one is just really, really great. But more importantly, I would say, is the book that goes along with this. So that kind of has this one as a bit of a sort of, I don't know, segue between books and decks, because the book is, let me zoom this out. The book is really, really comprehensive and really, really good. So for every card, let's go into an earlier major arcana. Okay, so here we have Jack and the Beanstalk for the Hanged Man. So there's the story information here about the fairy tale Jack and the Beanstalk. And then you also have information around the concept of like the message of that story and how that relates to your inner child work. This really talks about the issue of surrender, and there's more depth to this deck than you would think. And the guidebook is like, that's already page 91 and we're only on the Hanged Man. So this deck actually this book rather, actually has almost 300 pages. Yeah, just shy of 300 pages. And it gives you really great stuff to work with throughout the deck. I think if you're wanting to do, I have the title card, Isha Lerner and Mark Lerner. I have the title card as my bookmark for this book. But there is information in here about doing inner child work and connecting with your inner child. There's even information here about using this particular deck with children, which I think is really great. So this was one that I had when it was newer, and then I had decluttered it, and I acquired it again later on, and I'm glad I did. There's something really unique about it. So there's some different spreads here that will help you connect with inner child for sure, and just some interesting games and kind of concepts. Like, look, there's a hopscotch spread. Like, so this is really great, right? There's a lot of good information in here, and I just think this one is special, and there's not really a lot like it. Yeah, this was originally copyrighted in 1992. So yeah, it's pretty special, and this is one that, it doesn't have to be this one, but perhaps having a deck that brings you into a place of story, of fairy tale, to connect with that part of yourself could be useful if you're interested in doing inner child work. So those are the inner child cards. Now let's talk about books. So there's a couple books that I think are really great for working with the cycle. So working with the cycle of the year is a great way to do integration work around your self-worth path. So working with books or with courses or with materials that encourage you to continue work throughout your year, whether that is a seasonal practice, whether that is a practice where you work with your own natural cycles to go into depth and then into something more playful and then into all these kinds of things. And really, Avalon Within and my time in the Sisterhood of Avalon really formed for me a strong relationship with the concept of doing the work of personal growth on a cycle. And this is the newer edition. I also had the older one by Gina Talindru, who was the original founder of the Sisterhood of Avalon. And this version of the book is great because there's actually some photos here of some of the sacred locations in Glastonbury that are explored through this practice. I do think that the Avalon Within as a book does help you to understand a cycle you could work with to move through your personal growth practice on an ongoing basis. And I feel like this particular cycle, the one that's described and that is practiced when you work with this particular method, is incredibly powerful. It is one of the reasons why I have a tattoo on my right forearm. This is definitely a nod to my time in this practice. And this practice is so embedded in me now that it's become just the way that I move through the world in a subtler way. While I don't do a lot of these practices in formal ways anymore, the rhythm that I learned through this practice has stuck with me. And by that, I primarily am referring to the stations. And you'll see them described here in the table of contents. Let's just zoom in a bit. So we have the station of descent, the station of confrontation, the station of emergence, the station of resolution, and there's also a sort of mobile station of integration that happens between all of these other stations. But these stations describe a circle, a cycle that you can work with to go deep, to go within, and then to come back out again and to resolve and to learn and integrate what you've learned. And to me, this just really brings it all together for me. So I couldn't think of really anything much better to recommend if you are really excited about the idea of continuing your personal growth and self-worth work on an ongoing basis. I just think this is an incredible resource and one that should definitely not be overlooked. So along the same lines is this book here, The Seasonal Soul. This is another book, A Mystic's Guide to Inner Transformation. This is by Lauren Aletta, and this is a book that also encourages you to work with the seasons of the year, to continue to pay attention to yourself. There is a lot happening here, so let's just go over the contents. Part 1, Winter into the Cave, Spring, The Glimmering Sun. So this is Spring, Tools for the, Tools for the Alchemist. Summer, Run with the Wolves, Autumn, The Fading Light, and then Coming Full Circle. Basically, the way that this book, here we go, here, we'll give you a little glimpse into it. So here's spring. This is also a gorgeous book, by the way, and one that I've kind of been tempted to color in. But anyway, this is a really, really fantastic book talking about the different seasons and how they feel and how the kinds of work you might do during that particular season. There's little bits of wisdom. There's also practices and journal prompts and things you can do to just sort of dive in to the energy of that specific season. It talks about the way that it might feel. This book also, though, talks about how you can be in a season of spring, even if it's not actually spring. But I like really working with this book as a way to just kind of remind me of the cycle, right? And there's just a lot here for you to play with. Some beautiful words, some beautiful design in here, some practices that you can try. Look at, there's a 2-page spread here on anxiety. So interesting to me, the way that this is done. An exercise, navigating the new. And then you have tools. So it talks here about physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. There's some information here about chakras. It's really quite something, this book, The Seasonal Soul. And I can't remember where I first found out about it. It may have been on Dawn Michelle's channel, but Boho Tarot. But this is really spectacular. So I definitely recommend this book for working with cycle. And lastly, one of the chapters in the Self-Worth Path, when we're in the situation, when we're in the part of our self-worth journey where we're looking to integrate and move forward and really commit over the long haul, one of the things that I talk about in here is making your own rules. And if you are on any kind of a witchy path or you're interested in a witchy path, then what better book to recommend for making your own rules than Rebel Witch by Kellyanne Maddox. I have read this book in its entirety, and it is fantastic. I'm hoping to give it more of a full review in my May show and tell, which I think this video will come out before that, but I am hoping to share my thoughts more comprehensively, so keep an eye out for that. But this book is really a good one at just exploring the concept of a witchy practice from a very rebellious, do what's right for you kind of angle, which is what I'm all about for starters. It's very beginner friendly, but I do not think at all that you would be wasting your time on this if you are an advanced practitioner. If you've been practicing witchy stuff for a long time, you are going to find so many great little gems of wisdom. As you can see, I have several pages marked. I have highlighted all in this book. There's lots of bits and pieces here that have stood out to me as just being great little gems of wisdom. And if you just want to get your feet wet with what it's like to make up your own rules, this is kind of an interesting way to explore it. And I definitely recommend this book in general if you're interested in witchy stuff, but also if you're just curious about what it might look like to make your own rules. I think that this book does an excellent job of taking you along that process in the context of a witchy practice. So it might be an interesting read, even if you're not someone who considers yourself overly witchy. It might be interesting to see just how these topics are explored from the perspective of somebody who's saying, no, you get to make it your own, right? And that's really the subtitle of this book, Carve the Craft That's Yours Alone. Excellent book. Very much Kellyanne Maddox's voice. If you appreciate her content on YouTube, you will love this. But yeah, enough raving about that. All right, you guys, so that is the decks and the books that I recommend for moving through integration. Over the coming weeks, we're going to have a couple more videos talking about the subject of integration and hopefully rolling out a couple of ideas and practices that you can use as you continue to explore continuing on with your work of the self-worth path. Thank you again so much for joining me. As always, please do be sure and like this video if you enjoyed it or you found value in it. Do subscribe if you're new here. And don't forget to click the little bell so you're notified of all my future videos. Thank you again so much, and may your magic always shine from the inside out. Bye, guys.